what our aim is that we want to transition, let's say, the global agriculture value networks. We have a lot of issues ongoing to make them more sustainable, more equitable, and also more inclusive. And therefore, we have a very nice partnership with the three partners: Rabobank, who is working on this voluntary carbon market; Solidaridad, who are supporting global in the global south smallholders; and Maastricht University, let's say, as an academic partner. And together we have a research agenda, and we're also collaborating for quite a while, a few years. And in our research agenda, the smallholder farmers at the center of our research. And we aim to improve their living conditions and livelihood assets. And we have, let's say, three pillars. And the pillar today, which is at the center of today, the webinar, is the farmer-centric data governance. Issues like who is in control of the data, who has ownership, do farmers understand what is happening with their data? Another pillar is our sustainable business models, that you can see how can we, let's say, generate additional income streams for farmers, think about carbon farming. And the last one is about a better positioning of the smallholder farmers in global value chains. And these three pillars together are the research agenda, which also is translated into education. And by the end of the day, of course, we want to have impact. That's in a very, very nutshell a bit about the fair and small the fair and small data spearhead. But of course, let's go to the webinar for today. We have today almost 2 hours to discuss a very important topic about data and farmers in smallholders and ecosystems. And I'm really happy, and I just introduced, because also I want to don't want to talk too long. I'm really happy that we have a very interesting and prominent keynote speaker, Mantla Nkomo from SIGA. Mantla will give us a very interesting insights, let's say, exploring farmer-centric data governance from the practitioners' reflection. The practitioners, what's happening in the field, what's happening on the ground. And after Mantla's presentation, we have another presentation, just show it to you, where our colleague, Sidi Amar, will introduce us a bit into the report we developed, the Fair and Smart Data Report on smallholder-oriented data governance principles. And as I already said, Sidi is a researcher at our side. So this combination of, let's say, academic insights, together what Mantla will show us on practitioners' insight, I think is very prominent and also very interesting to discuss. That will be the foundation. And later on, we will explain in a bit, we will dive a bit deeper into the so-called panel sessions, the 3 parallel panel sessions, and then we will touch on these topics. I stop sharing because now I really want to give the floor to our esteemed guest, Mantla. I stop sharing, and the floor is yours. Etienne, maybe you can help for the presentation for Mantla.
I made him a co-host, so he should be able to share. Otherwise, I can also share.
No problem, Etienne. Ron, thank you so much for this introduction. I think you might still need to give me permission to share because it's saying screen sharing is disabled.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Etienne, just share the slides.
Yes,
yeah. Okay. From your side.
Yeah. Sorry about that. But Ron, thank you so much for the introduction. And I think while Etienne is putting up the slides, I do want to reflect a bit on what you said in your introduction. I think there's 2 things that stand out for me. The first one is that the research that you have been doing at Maastricht is not purposeless research. It's research with a purpose in the sense that you're saying that ultimately you want to put farmers at the center of the conversation, at the center of the data conversation. And it's not really also about just representativity or getting farmers a seat at the table. It's really asking the question around, so what? Why should farmers be part of this data conversation? And I think it's because there are livelihoods associated with this, and livelihoods matter. And what I'd like to do in my in the few minutes that you've given me is to maybe reflect a few perspectives that I've gathered in this space over the last few years in really trying to explore this issue of the farmer data ecosystem and expressing some views from a practitioner perspective. Next slide, please. I think what is very clear, and I'm sure most of you on this webinar will agree with me, is that we are in a time where it is inevitable for smallholder farmers to be featuring prominently in conversations about data, about digital. Because if you look at what is dominating the headlines in terms of the latest technologies that are coming up, all of them, at the heart of them, it's about data. You know, whether you are looking at the latest craze on artificial intelligence through the use of large language models, it's all about data. It's all about your ability to access data and to turn it into something else that people can use. Whether you're looking at you know, the Web3 revolution that is upon us, the future of mobility, whether you're looking at, you know, farm equipment, all of these things at the heart of them are about data. So we are in the middle of the digital and the data-driven revolution. And like all revolutions, two things can happen. There will be victims and there will be victors. And I think the conversation we're having today is really trying to explore what will it take to ensure that smallholders are the victors in this data or digital revolution and not victims. Next slide, please. And when you get closer to the topic, what is very clear is that, you know, there's probably two classes of conversations about data and smallholder farmers. It's about the data about them, right? Their demographics, where they are located. Most of farmers that we work with in the global south are farming on soils. It's about those soils. It's about the practices, you know, that they're engaging on those soils. What yields are they getting? Is there a gap between what is expected and what these farmers are getting? How is their climate changing, for example? What are the hazards that they are facing every day? And what typologies? You know, I've seen hundreds of papers trying to answer the question of what is a smallholder farmer? And you get to a point where you wonder, does it really matter? Because at the end of the day, small, medium, or large, these farmers are facing the same challenges every day. And we really need to try and understand how, you know, we are profiling these farmers so that we can service and serve them better. So data about farmers is important. But what is important about this data is how do we increase the density of that data? Because the more dense the data is, it's almost like you've got a picture and that picture is in layers of dirt. The more you wipe that screen, the clearer the picture becomes. That's what density of data does for smallholder farmers. It helps us to understand them better. And certainly for ourselves as the CG, we found that it's important that we develop tools that allow us to build a very good profile of farmers and therefore build data about them. But it's data for what? It's for actionable insights, right? How do we convert that data into stuff which farmers can do something with? So for example, are we helping farmers understand what yield they can expect? Are we helping farmers understand what investment choices they need to make? So investment prioritization. Are we helping farmers to interpret climate information services? Yeah, you're telling me it's going to rain tomorrow, so what? Well, it depends on whether I'm planting, whether my maize crop is flowering, or I'm ready to harvest and I don't want rain. So the information around climate information services for farmers becomes important. And when we're talking about issues of variety selection, planting data advisory, there's a long list of data-driven services that we can make available for farmers if we actually organize ourselves better and put the farmer at the center of the conversation. And I think this is what we are really dealing with today. Next slide, please. But I think the reason why CD and others did this study is because, you know, this thing doesn't go in a straight line, right? It's a complicated business to move from data to insights. It's almost like you're playing snakes and ladders. Sometimes you're thrown back to the starting point. Sometimes you're swallowed by a snake. And this is the daily reality of this conversation around how we move from data to insights. To start with the data itself, like, where is this data? Who has it, right? Is it in public infrastructure? Is it in private sector databases? Is it in research databases? Where is this data? And I think if there's one hurdle that we need to overcome, it's about making data open and accessible. And this includes both private data and private sector data, but also public data. And actually, if we can move towards digital public infrastructure, I think we'll be able to move much, much closer to getting to the end goal, which is the insights. But even when we've got the data open and accessible, there's the issue of privacy. How do we make sure that those that are accessing the data are doing no harm, but they're adding value to the aspirations and goals of the farmers? It's an important issue. But when people collect data, how are we ensuring that the language that we use to collect this data is the same? So here I'm talking about the ontologies. How do we make sure that if it's a bag in Ethiopia, it's also a bag in Kenya, and it's a bag in Zimbabwe? And when we read bag, we mean the same thing. There's still a lot of work that I think needs to be done here, and it requires, I think, independent institutions to help us develop a common language, common ontologies that will allow us to overcome this hurdle, which I think is also a source of friction, to say, yes, when the data is open, you've accessed it, but you can't do much with it because it doesn't make any sense. Then there's the issue of quality. You know, I've worked in the NGO space for many years, and I know for a fact that quite often when we collect data in the field, it's a minefield. When what you get back often needs a lot of cleaning. How do we automate our ability to make the data quality and usable, and really overcome that barrier that I think comes from that challenge? But I think the last one before insights, I think which is important is what we in the CG call fairness. How do we make the data fair? Fair in the sense that it is findable, right? Wherever it's located, can people access it, right? And after findable, it's about accessibility. Can you access it after you find it? Is it interoperable? Can it operate in different environments? And is it reusable? Because if we're not able to do this, I think we are shortchanging farmers from the great potential that I think we can generate if the data was fair. Next slide, please. And then I think when you bring it closer to home, I wanted to share this slide because it comes from the Solidaridad Farmer Atlas, where they interviewed in excess of close to 10,000 farmers. And what was really interesting was that out of these 18 countries, hey, this is the global south, 18 countries, still we've got only 2/3 of the farmers able to access internet. And if you break that down by gender, it's even lower than that. So it means that even though the internet provides an opportunity, right now it's still a barrier. How do we liberalize, democratize access to internet services to as many farmers as possible? Because if we can do this, the hurdles that I shared about a short while ago can be overcome, and we can get closer to giving farmers real benefits from data. Next slide, please. And I like this particular slide because I think for me, it helps to capture the real challenge, right? Yes, you've collected the data. Yes, you've gone through all those hurdles, you have dealt with them, but what question are you actually answering? And whose question is it? I think for data to be fair for farmers, it needs to be helping farmers answer significant questions in their lives. What crop am I planting this season? How do I prepare my land when 4 or 5 organizations are coming at me with different approaches? Some are saying conservation agricultures, some are saying agroecology, some are saying use integrated soil fertility management, some are saying regen ag. How do I prepare my land if I'm going to get the most out of it? If I'm going to use fertilizers and other similar inputs, what is the right amount? And what is the amount that will allow me to make money at the end of the day? And then there's important issues around planting date. We found in the CG that one of the biggest drivers of poor yields for farmers in the global south is actually planting, late planting, and also the issue of plant population. So how do we deliver this information to farmers exactly where they are by leveraging the data that they've given us? Next slide, please. So I think as I bring my talk to an end, I think we need to accept that for us to deliver fair farm data, it needs to benefit the farmers. But if it's going to be smart as well, it can't be general. Often what you find is that the information that filters to farmers is at a very high level. Imagine a farmer in the middle of the Kenya highlands thinking about their soil health, and they are using the FAO digital map, soil map of the world. That's too general. It's not going to help them. But if we can use the data we have about farmers, and then we generate insights that give them site-specific recommendations, then I think we are bringing the smart to be a partner to the fair. If you look at seasonal focus, I'm in East Africa right now, and we're expecting an El Nino year. So if I tell people that there's going to be El Nino, if someone is sitting in Samburu in Kenya, or they are sitting in Nakuru, that means totally different things. How do we translate the data that we have to give field level advisory to farmers? So it needs to be specific if it's going to be smart. It needs to be timely. It needs to be precise, and farmers need to be able to do something about it. Next slide, please. So for us as the CG, we've developed a system that really tries to be demand-driven, to employ the best-in-class science around turning farmer demands into solutions, and then bringing in issues of human-centered design, user experience, trying to discover farmer typologies, because if we can do that, then we'll make sure that we are delivering the services that farmers really need from the data that they have generated or data that we've generated about them in order to produce the insights that we're putting in front of them. Next slide, please. I just want to share a quick example as I wrap up in Ethiopia, where all of these things that I'm talking about have come together. In Ethiopia, there's quite a number of regional agricultural institutes. There's the National Agricultural Institute and a lot of actors in the agricultural space. All of them have been doing research for over half a century, but they were keeping their data in separate places. When they were able to agree on what they call the coalition of the willing and bring all their data into one place so that it was findable, it was accessible, interoperable, and reusable, then the people who were able to do the analytics could work on it and actually develop a solution that can give farmers site and location-specific advisory services where they are. This took a bit of time, but I think it shows what is possible if we can do that. And what has that benefited farmers? Well, in Ethiopia right now, as we speak, farmers are able to get site and location-specific advisory services, and they've been able to increase their own yields by 20 to 30%. And I do believe that when we organize ourselves this way, when we target the specific challenges that are in the data ecosystem, are in the data pipeline, and put farmers at the center, we can really deliver fair and smart farm data. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Manla, for this very interesting presentation. And from your, you can really talk from the heart and also from your practitioner's perspective. For all of you, please keep your question for a while. For a moment, we first go to Sidi's presentation. You can also put some questions in the chat, and then we come back to you. So I want to go to Sidi, also for the sake of time. And Sidi will reflect a bit on the research, on the academic research we did for the smallholder data principles. Please, Sidi, go ahead.
You're muted, Sidi.
Yeah, I'll share my screen and start the presentation immediately. It's taking a bit of time, but yes, I found it. So my presentation is going to be about the guiding principles for a fair smallholder data ecosystem, which is the theme of this webinar. I will talk about the data ecosystem of smallholder farmers, and I will conclude with presenting our data governance principles. So to just give you a background on smallholder farmers, I think Nkomo has already done a great job of presenting the situation of the smallholder farmers and smallholder farmers data from a practitioner perspective and application perspective. But it won't hurt to just, as a reminder, to talk about the smallholder farmers. Who are they? There are different definitions. A lot of them are based on the size of the farm. In FSD, we came up with our own working definition for smallholder farmers to encapsulate and to showcase their reality. So for us, smallholders are a vulnerable group of people cultivating small plots of land to feed their families and earn an income, mostly located in rural areas of countries in the global south, with limited access to financial resources and essential infrastructure. So if we take the main criteria of 2 hectares in size, 84% of the world's 570 million farms are smallholdings. And this would translate that smallholder farmers use 24% of the agricultural land globally. They produce 29% of the crops, and they provide 32% of the world's food. As you can see, there are examples from the Farmer Atlas of Solidaridad, which has ample information on the situation of smallholder farmers. I advise you all to check it out. Just as an example, 75% of cocoa is produced by smallholder farmers, 70% of coffee, and 70% of tea. This is just the commodity, showing you how important and essential smallholder farmers for global food security. Now, why the smallholder data is collected? That's the question. For many reasons. Some of them are mentioned here, like regulatory compliance, supply chain traceability, sustainability reporting, input services, developmental programs, ecosystem services, financial services, marketing and branding, certification, scientific research, and for increasing production and manufacturing. So farmers' data is as essential as their commodity, and they're generating a big economy. So what are then the issues with the data governance of smallholder farmers? Here I mentioned just some of them, the highlights, let's say, but they're not difficult to understand because the root cause of them is very present, and the impact also is easily to perceive. So one of the primordial problems that we have when it comes to the data governance of smallholder farmers and farmers in the global south is lack of intergovernmental data governance frameworks. In Europe, we have the GDPR. In other countries, we have different frameworks, and sometimes there's a lack of those. and to have one kind of seamless application of regulation is very difficult. Another aspect would be the asymmetry in power among the stakeholders. A lot of entities and organizations coming from the global north, they have the resources and they have the means and the knowledge to create value of the data. That's not the case for the smallholder farmers. There's also a lack of transparency on issues such as data ownership, data rights, data privacy, and security. Another very important aspect that is creating problems in this sphere is the complexity of contracts and licensing agreements, leaving smallholder farmers with limited negotiating power. And to add the particularity of smallholder farmers, the lack of access to digital tool and infrastructure hinder their participation. Also, the lack of understanding and knowledge about the value of data itself. All of those issues actually could culminate into what we call data colonialism. It's just, instead of raw material being extracted, it's data that is extracted, valued without the participation and the benefits getting to the people who are, this data is extracted from in the global south. So given this kind of, let's say, grim picture of the issues, there are good news about the data ecosystem of smallholder farmers and how it should be governed. One is that many organizations are coming up with their own initiatives and frameworks for farmer-centric data governance. You can see at the bottom of the slide some of the initiatives and the frameworks. There are new EU regulations such as the CSRD that is prompting new discussions and implementation when it comes to the governance of smallholder data and farmers' data in general. And most importantly, there is a business case for farmer-centric data governance, which could actually help with data integration and sharing that cut on cost, ensure reliability, and allowing creation of new application products and services. So what are FSD smallholder-oriented data governance principles? So I'll walk you through the process of how we came up with those principles. So it's based on a literature review of gray and scientific literature with the frame of GDPR as the frame of reference, and we base the development of those principles on 4 criteria. First, the principle have to account for important thematic areas in the smallholder data ecosystem, such as digital sovereignty, informed consent, fairness, and resource asymmetry. We define all those important notions in our report, so I would advise you to read them. Second, the principles have to be practical and relevant and implementable, albeit they're overarching goals, but we have enabling conditions that could be translated easily into practice. Third, they have to be consistent with the associated SDGs, and that would be 1, 2, and 8, and 10. And if you don't recall what is that, it's more about food security, combating poverty, and ensuring agricultural sustainability. The fourth criteria for development of those, they have to match the concepts of fair and responsible data governance, which are accountability, transparency, empowerment, and harm avoidance. So quickly, this is how we visualize the smallholder data ecosystem, with smallholders in the middle as the data sources. They're passive stakeholders in this ecosystem where their data is being used and exchanged for services and compensation by other entities that are more resourceful and more powerful in the decision-making. So as Mandla mentioned, the ontology and the definition, the terminologies here may differ, but it doesn't take away from that, that smallholders are still at the passive stage of being part of the data ecosystem, and there are other entities who actually generate value from the data and control the access to it. So we developed 5 principles with 11 enabling conditions. Again, this is kind of a long plug-in for our report, but I would advise you to read thoroughly through through the enabling conditions of those. So I will go through rapidly through the principles themselves. Ethical responsibility and accountability. Basically, the difference in power in the ecosystem should be reflected in that organization that have the power and the resources in the ecosystem should recognize that are accountable and responsible for the handling of the data of the farmers. They should not collect the data of the farmers without legitimate and necessary use of it. And they should also take the socioeconomic conditions of the farmers into consideration when dealing with the data. Sustainable benefit sharing would be the second principle, which actually require that all the stakeholders adhering to the system get consistent benefit from it. And as also Mandla mentioned, it's not about the data itself for the farmers. The farmers need the insights, the information, and to be delivered to them in a way that they can use it. Third principle would be legitimate expectation of privacy and security. So clear rules should be already set up to protect the data of the farmers. Mechanism of risk management and compensation, and also taking the local context into defining what is private. Provision of practical necessities would be the fourth, and it's based on the particularities of smallholder farmers being unable to access and participate because of the lack of digital tools and infrastructure, and also because they need training and knowledge about the value of data. And the last guiding principle would be transparent and deliberate decision-making and conflict resolution. There should be clear assignment of roles. As mentioned previously in the first principle, there should be stakeholders who are accountable for certain action, and there should be clear mechanism of remediation once there are conflicts of interest in the ecosystem. So what is next? So we want to take those principles, garner consensus around them, and turn them into practical mechanisms of implementation. And this could be done by incorporating the perspective of smallholder farmers, developing effective methodology for monitoring to the adherence to this principle, maybe a certification scheme or a reporting mechanism. We want also to explore and develop fair and transparent price sharing formulas for farmers' data. And we want also, in collaboration with anybody who's interested in this, to develop case studies on the applicability and the implementation of those principles. I hope I didn't take a lot of your time. Thank you for listening to me. And yeah, feel free to ask questions, but I leave now the stage to Juan.
Thanks a lot, Sidi. Well done. To summarize this, I must say, very extensive report in just a few minutes. And as I already said to all of us, please read the report, which also has, by the way, been reviewed by many different experts from different organizations and even some people who are around today. Having said that, I think we have time for one or two questions before we explain a bit about the sessions. Does someone have a question to Mandla or to Sidi, or maybe a combination? You have to see the practitioner's perspective a bit, an academic report. I mean, of course, we want to align both worlds. Is there a question? Raise your hand, and otherwise we move on.
Yeah.
I think Ron, while we're waiting for the questions, I do want to make a comment that
Go ahead.
Sidi and I didn't collaborate on our presentations, but I think for me, what was really interesting to see was how there's a lot of alignment. The findings that he has made, and also some of the things that I shared. So I think at least we can say that there's a common agenda that is emerging about this topic. And therefore, I think it creates a good opportunities for us to work together and move this topic forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Mandla. Well noted. There's a question from Ahmed. Ahmed, please. Go ahead.
Hello, this is me, Ahmed from Czech Republic. I'm a scientist, associate scientist at the Global Change Research Institute. I would like to raise the issue about the point which is talking about decolonization of the data. And I would like to raise the point that also there is another important issue related to I could say disperse the cloud of suspicious about the data which is coming from the global south to the global north. For instance, me as a scientist from the global south, I have been in some situation when I produce some publications, I'm sending them to the scientific journals. They are suspecting about the quality of the data and credibility of the data which has been collected, which is collected in the correct way. I have been for instance, in one incident, I tried to publish one paper about green spaces in Khartoum, the capital of Sudan. And I got such kind of one of the reviews, which is anonymous reviewer, who were saying that he suspected about the quality of the data. So this is also another issue that there is a huge cloud of doubt about the data and the quality of the data, which comes from the global south to the global north for such kind of in publications or also. This is also, I guess, another issue. I guess it's worth to be discussed and raised. Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
This is my comment. But thank you
Thanks
for. Yeah, welcome.
Yeah, thanks a lot for your question. Important topic, the quality of data, and maybe a brief reaction, maybe first from Sidi and then from Mantla, and then we go to the panel sessions.
Yeah,
what do you think about this?
Yeah, thank you.
Sidi?
Yeah, thank you so much for your for what you said, and I think that's really an issue, and it's also on the other side that the discussion that because of the fear of digital colonialism that we shouldn't invest, that we shouldn't take on the digital economy and introduce it to the farmers, and I think that's a misconception. So. And that's why we need actually data governance, voluntary data governance frameworks. That's not only for the farmers, but for the academics, for the researchers that, yeah, we can exchange, share reliable data, and there's not going to be exploitation and the benefit is going to be shared. So I think this is applicable to many domains, but this is our domain, the smallholder farmers domain. And I see a lot of similarity in other parts of the supply chain and other industries and sectors. So yeah, I would agree with the point that we should have more trust, but the trust comes with having guardrails and having frameworks. So
thanks a lot, Sidi. Mantla, maybe final reflection.
Yeah, look, I think Ahmed makes an important point. He basically touches on something that is in your paper that talks about the power dynamics around data and data governance. That you cannot have this conversation in isolation. It's located within the political economy where we operate. But having said that, I think we have a choice of either succumbing to that or organizing around that. At Solidaridad, they've got a saying that says you protest, but then you propose. So what is the proposition, I think, and that's what Sidi's paper is about. It's a proposition around how we can break through some of those obvious barriers that then would allow for conversations around data, the quality thereof and its use thereof to be much more fair and much more reasonable. So I think we've got an opportunity here, and I think we must take it here.
Thank you, Smadla. There's one more question. We can take that one, and then we go to the panel sessions. Christopher.
Yes, thank you very much, and excellent presentations, really interesting. My name is Chris Wunderlich, and I'm working now on the International Coffee Organization's Coffee Private Public Task Force. So my comment is a bit more related to commodities that are traded internationally, but the issue of data collection and using data, I think also needs to go into the area of how can it empower exporting countries to have a more equal level in discussions around prices, around management of the supply chains. And the data is needed to be able to address some of these limitations of the international supply chains and the sectors. So not just looking, which often happens, in what can the farmer do, but really how can these sectors be transformed and improved to provide the benefits, because the reality is there's simply limitations to what can happen at the field level or even the exporter country level. So I just wanted to raise that issue, that this data also needs to be packaged and presented and done in a way that can help empower that kind of discussion.
Thanks a lot, Christoph. Very important remark. It's aligning the sector to data and to the supply chain. We will definitely touch on these issues in the session. So my proposal is that we go to the sessions in a few minutes. I will just explain a bit how that will go. We have, let me show you the slides. Okay. We will have 3 sessions. One session is about what can we learn from existing farmer-centric governance initiatives, which will be led by Josje Spearings with a very nice panel. We will come back to that later. Then we have another session about how feasible is it to use the farmer data governance principles in practice to apply them, which will be led by Else Scholte from Solidaridad. And we have a third session, how to build consensus on these principles and who needs to participate, which will be led by Sidi, the moderator. In all sessions, we have experts, a lot of expertise in the panel. And the idea is that based on these questions, the panels discuss a bit among themselves, but there will also be plenty of room for the audience to participate. So what we will do, we will take a break now, just to have let's say, the moderators and the note takers a few minutes time to align a bit if necessary. But in the meantime, just to inform you, as I already did, about let's see, the different panels there. We had, as you know, 3 panels. One panel, which was led by Josje Spearings, but also in the room were Robin Anderson from Emerging Age and Lars Connard from GIZ, and also Royan Bolling from the Netherlands Food Partnership. And they discuss about what can we learn from existing farmer-centric data governance initiatives. They talked. I was also in that session, and there was a lot of discussions on many different interesting topics. But I will give later, Josje, the floor. Then we had in the second session, we had which was the moderator Else Scholte from Solidaridad. Was Martin Vergils for Fair Food was in the panel. Schatterdoe from Solidaridad Asia, and also Jungo for Solidaridad Southern Africa, and Thomas Vaesen from Meridia. And they talked about the feasibility how to implement farmer-centric data governance principles in practice. And probably they also discussed a lot of other topics. We will hear back in a minute from Elsa. And last but not least, today we had moderated by Sidi from Maastricht University, and Jelmer van der Mortel from Rabobank. Econ was in the panel. Also, Frederik Klaassen from Solidaridad was in the panel, and Kate Francis from Maastricht University. And I already heard from Frederik. That was so much interesting stuff that we definitely needed more time. Having said that, I stop sharing, and I guess I can give the room to the first moderator, which is from session number 1, Josje. Do you want to brief us a bit what you discussed and what were the main findings? Please go ahead.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no, it was really nice discussion with the panelists. We talked a little bit about also what is the main things you need to consider when wanting to implement a farmer-centric governance approach. So I've listed them now, and also please jump in, one of the panelists, if I forget something. So we really talked about it. I mean, it's really complicated. There's, for example, a lot of legislations that people are juggling from the different countries. For example, they export. It's about the whole supply chain you need to encounter. So one of the main things we said, okay, what is really some crucial elements we really need to consider? As we talked about the need for standardization. There's no standardization of data, which was noted in some of the keynotes before as well. Also, accessibility of tools. Tools for data collection can be very expensive. So there should be more cheap and open source tools available, which allow these organizations to collect the data in a safe way. And then we talked about a clear business case, having a business case of the value, the cost and the benefit of this data collection for everybody in the supply chain. So a crucial thing we talked about is the supply chain approach. So not only I think in these conversations, we often now have people here from the US or Europe, and now we had somebody also from Canada, that those people in the room, and we talk about these kind of organizations and how we can, from our point of view, but it's really crucial to involve the whole supply chain and make sure that all of them, there's a business case actually for everybody there, from the farmer until the
You're muted, Yoshi.
Oh, I'm sorry. Where did I just mute or? Okay.
Only a few words, don't worry.
Oh, okay, perfect. And then we talked about the bringing back the information to the farmers. So we talked about first the collection of informed consent and the struggles around that. But also when you bring it back, it's very crucial. And when you talk to them also about consent, it's crucial to talk about local languages and how to incorporate them, but also think about like the disaggregation of this data. So the subgroups you're talking about, the value of this data for them. So not only on individual basis, but also on group basis. And then the importance of credibility of the data, and external audits are very expensive. So thinking about what kind of other ways, potentially self-reporting can increase the quality of the data. And I think those were our main points that we talked about, that we said, hey, those should be in place to set up a clear, good, farmer-centric data governance. Oh, wait, and the one point I almost forgot was also the local infrastructure point. So really making sure that also the farmers have access to the data or are able to have access to the data. And what a good point that Robin made there, which I found very crucial. It's not only for them now, but it's also to make it still attractive for future generations to keep working as farmers in these areas, to have this kind of infrastructure ready there. So those were our main outcomes, I think. If there's anything I missed, just feel free to add.
Thanks a lot, Yoshi. Did we miss something from the other panel members? There's time for one question to this group. Does someone has a question or a comment? Otherwise, we move on. Otherwise, you keep your question to the end. It's also possible. No? Okay, then we move on. Thanks a lot, Josh, and also the other panel members. To Elsa, group number 2. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Ron. I may need some help from the other panel members to complement what I've taken away, because it was an interesting discussion. We were supposed to talk about feasibility of such a data ecosystem. And I think in general, the panelists agreed that yes, it's feasible, but there are a lot of things that need to be addressed and quite complex. We spent quite some time talking about power dimensions. So we actually said, yeah, data is becoming commodified. It's becoming a global commodity, and the same unequal power dimensions that you see in many of the main commodities, you also see with data. So then we spent time thinking practically how to go around that and how to deal with that. And there comes the question, where is the value of data? Where is it going? And the whole idea of actually bringing monetary value directly to farmers for their data is quite complex. Someone said, yeah, Google is also not paying us directly for our data, but it's coming back to us in the form of services. And we see the same opportunities in working with small farmer data, that actually the value of the data comes back to the farmers in better yields, more influence. And there were some nice examples there. Fairfood shared an example of how they've been working with spices and really changing the profits also for farmers with the help of fair data, but also stressing that it's a very long process and it takes a lot of time, as in years, and we're already late to the game and there's still a lot to be done. Shatadru shared some inspiring examples of how it works for tea in Asia, where tea farmers really own the data themselves. They have their own cooperative and they use these data to get more influence, for example, also in the government, or to have better price negotiations. So in that sense, data, it's really feasible to have fair data and to have them bring value to the farmers. Still, it would be very good if companies also start paying for data, because everyone says, yes, we see the value, but who is actually paying? Let me see. Yeah, so who decides who takes what benefits? There's still unequal power dimensions. Then we also talked about the importance of quality of the data. We see a lot of data that are not sufficient quality or false, and that influences the credibility of farmer data, and credibility is quite important for the value again. So we see all in all a lot of challenges, but also some real examples where it can be done and it really gives farmers more income and more influence. So that is quickly what I remember from our long conversation, but maybe the other panel members have things to add in summary.
Thanks a lot, Elsa. Someone else from the panel in session number 2? No? That's a question about what Elsa told on behalf of the group. Nobody? Okay, then we move on to, last but not least, our colleague, Sidi. Sidi, can you present the findings from session 3?
Sure, I'm really not good at taking notes, as you know, Ron, so I might need help from the panelists. But our session, as you mentioned previously, it's about how to foster consensus around this guiding principles or other guiding principles within the data ecosystem of smallholder farmers. And I asked the panelists to draw from their own experience, how can we have such consensus? How can we generate it? And they agreed that there's a place for these principles, that they touch on a lot of subjects that there's an agreement on: transparency, farmer consent, streamlining, dealing with the data of the farmers, having common infrastructure. All of these things, when you approach all the stakeholders in the data ecosystem, basically they would say yes to it. What is going to differ is how much of implementation and investment they're going to put into making this happen. So there's kind of an agreement on that side. The other thing was like, then who should take the initiative? Who can drive this forward? And the answer has to come from everybody, basically. There's a case for regulation. It's needed in certain instances, but also there is a need to make a market and a business case for it. The win-win situation is very popular among our panelists, that a business case should be made for businesses, organization, and everybody to adhere to certain guiding principles to deal with the farmers' data. Frederick mentioned particularly the donors. They're really important when it comes to financing this kind of initiatives, because no one, let's say, company would take upon themselves to establish the infrastructure for this and to drive the consensus by themselves for others to join. So maybe financing coming from donors could help with that. We talked about having kind of, if they were to put a roadmap, what would be the steps toward having this consensus or adoption of principles. And also it came back to the idea that, okay, there should be an agreement first. There should be participation from key stakeholders. Farmers should have a seat at the table. And then whether it's going to be market-driven or regulation-driven, the piloting is necessary, and starting from smaller implementation and then scaling up could be the solution. I think I might have missed some interesting point there, but this is basically what I gathered, that resources are needed and participation from all stakeholders, especially the powerful and the well-resourced one.
Thanks a lot, Sidi. Maybe one of the other panel members, something to add, or did Sidi do a good job?
I don't think so. But it was really a great panel discussion, and there were a lot of important points that have been raised.
Happy to hear that.
during the
Happy to hear
discussion.
that. Before we go to the final part, as already said, it's time for a question. We discussed a lot. We had very, very interesting presentation by Mandla and also by Sidi. You have been in different sessions. You have also listened a bit about reflection, summary. Before I go to my final part, is there someone who has a question or a comment or whatever?
There was a question in the chat. Sake Kruk was wondering about the different roles of private and public sector actors in shaping the smallholder data ecosystem. And the question was, are these data ecosystem principles aimed at private sector initiatives to ensure they benefit smallholders? And I saw Joshua also gave already an answer to that. Maybe it's also nice to discuss this in the plenary here.
Someone to reflect on that, Sidi?
Yeah, just to say one thing, those principles are meant for all the stakeholders, but as I mentioned clearly in the presentation, because there's a asymmetry of power in the ecosystem, to make the ecosystem farmer-centric, other stakeholders, the powerful ones, should actually take the helm on this and start making room for the farmers and designing the data collection and the data valorization, having the interests of farmers in their mind. So yeah, it's meant for everybody, but the emphasis or the onus is put on the well-resourced stakeholders in the data ecosystem. And now I'll let Christopher chime in.
Thanks, Sidi, for the answer, and thanks, Sake, for the question. Christopher, you have a question or comment?
Thanks. It's more of a comment. I've heard the reference to incentives be made, and I think the data really needs to be focusing more on how can it be used to incentivize smallholders. And in that, we need to differentiate between food security issues and food production, that's for home consumption, and export markets, obviously. But if we're looking at the export markets, I think we need to start thinking in a different paradigm. Smallholders no longer, realistically, in my view, can be viewed solely as productive income generators. They're actually land stewards. And the issues we're addressing with climate change, with immigration issues, with water and natural resource conservation, that needs to be incentivized, the services they're providing. And so this combination between private and public sector, where the private sector looks at issues of supply chain development, supplier development, and the private sector looks at public goods issues, need to be combined, and the data is key to do that. So I think this data needs, the whole discussion around data needs to focus more on how can it be used to provide the proper incentives in the proper way. Just wanted to add that point. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Christopher. Very important indeed, not only agriculture production, but also, let's call it payments and ecosystem services. There's one, I take one final question and then we have to move on. Arjen Phillips, please.
Yeah, hi, thank you. It's a comment as well as a question also. I just wanted to know, for the panelists to shed light, because there is power asymmetry that was mentioned, and of course, the GPTR, which is prevalent in the EU, might not be, it's not something which is prevalent in India or, across global South. So, will small farmer data ecosystems will be driven by more of a context-specific, drive? For example, it might be market-driven in India, probably, and more of a regulation-driven in EU. If probably, can shed light on that, it might become clear for us practitioners, especially in the global South, when we are engaging with this ecosystem and governance.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Arjan. Very important comment and question. I think there's some expertise in the room. I don't know, maybe Lars, do you give it a try, or maybe someone else who is more familiar on this topic? Or someone else who feels comfortable to answer? It's not an exam, eh?
Well, I can come in if nobody is.
Yes, of course.
Because I think it's a very pertinent issue which has been raised earlier also in the chat box about the government, the role of the government and the private sector. There was another question Arjun raised about the data ecosystem in Global South and the data requirement under different regulations coming up. It is not just the European Union deforestation regulation. It is also the carbon ecosystem, which is getting developed. It is about the ecosystem services, which you talked about, and all those processes. So my sense is it will be good that what Omar mentioned, that there is a necessity to have a guideline, a charter. And that would act as a kind of a mechanism, in certain cases, advocacy with the governments. It could be any government where we say, guys, there is a principle which has been developed in an inclusive way, which has been vetted and supported. What is critical is, of course, to ensure that the smallholder farmers, businesses, and others agree to it and align with that. If you have that, then it will be easier to kind of advocate with the government, hold local companies responsible, and also to benchmark and support development of local regulations where such regulations do not exist. So I think that's how it will go. European Union will obviously have its own regulations. China will have its own. India will have its own. But then these regulations are driven by certain interests. How we ensure and whether these regulations are really, and we heard many panelists, that it doesn't reflect the smallholders' interest in Africa, probably. I am not sure if EUDR reflects the interest of a smallholder coffee farmer in Colombia. So I think that's where the role of the civil society organization needs to come in to ensure that we continue to engage with the government and other agencies. For that, we need a benchmark, and that's the starting, I think, what Maastricht University is doing, which is highly appreciable. Thanks. I don't know if I could answer to a certain extent Arjun's question.
Thanks a lot, Shatadu. I think you make it quite clear also in terms of differentiation between countries and also probably even between small, let's say, profiles. It's not one solution which fits which solves all the problems indeed. Okay, thanks a lot, all of you. For the final part, I just share my screen for 1-2 minutes. Let's this one. Yeah. I think we did a lot. We had a very interesting discussion. And I said, a title, Our Common Journey Ahead. And I put a question mark, but probably there should not be a question mark, because I see a lot of enthusiasm and also a lot of willingness in this discussion we have with people from a lot of expertise and different organizations. So if you can align and collaborate, we can definitely take next steps. So let's say, what is our agenda? Also, let's say it from the Fair and Smart Data Spearhead. Today, We discuss about the report we published, but we also definitely want to link that to therefore the insights from Mandela are very important to call it a practitioner's perspective. And we're really looking for feedback on our guiding principles. Already there was some feedback today, a lot of feedback, I must say. But any ideas you have, please send them to us. And if you want to contribute to these guidelines, that we at a certain moment renew them or whatever, please let us know. That's something what we have on the agenda and which we really want to work on together with you. As, let's say, an academic partner, but we need also other organizations on board to make it more practical. And that links also a little bit to what Chateaudoux said. The second part is more, yeah, okay, you can have these principles, but what does it mean in practice? Mandela already talked a lot about it. So if you have ideas from your organization or your network or whatever, and we want to test together these principles to see, does it work in practice and so forth, let us know. We are more than willing to set up together with you some small cases that we can learn from it and also in that way improve the principles. And the last part we are looking at ahead is the question, should we organize ourselves? So there are a lot of initiatives, there are probably also a lot of principles. How can we align them in terms to this factor we are looking into, the agriculture data ecosystem? That is maybe a little bit more on the horizon, a long-term ambition, but in this way we want to go forward. And that also means that we had today a very, at least from my perspective, a very interesting and nice meeting, good discussions, a lot of very valuable insights, but we will organize more, let's say, meetings, webinars and so forth on this topic. We have called it data-oriented FSD events, and more have to come. So we will inform you about that. So also that, stay tuned on our website. You will get the information on time. And last but not least, I want to thank some people, not all people, but of course, first I want to thank Mandela and also Sidi for their presentations. I want to thank also Josje, Elsa and Sidi for being moderators, and also, of course, the other people who had the note takers. The panel members, a lot of thank you for being around and sharing with us your expertise, and of course also you as an audience. I mean, without the audience, it doesn't make sense to organize these events, and we really want to connect to all of you. And last but not least, again, a special word of thanks, I would say, to my colleague Sidi. He's one of the authors of the report, which was important for all of us, but also, yeah, he put a lot of time in making this event possible and connecting to people who were willing to become a participant in the panel and so forth. So also, Sidi, thanks a lot. It was a very interesting topic today, and we had a great meeting. I know I stopped sharing because it's almost 3 o'clock, which means we had a very nice afternoon together, and it's time to say goodbye, and I wish you all the best for today and the coming days, and let's stay in contact. We are in contact with you, but also stay in contact with us.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a nice day.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.